processors. I know a lot of you guys have been talking about processors and all that wonderful fun stuff. I wanted to give you guys some of my input on the topic, and it's not about megahertz necessarily. It's got more to do with other factors. I'll give you, not an Intel or an AMD fanboy necessarily. I'll give you a quick rundown on my how my own computer, my main computer, is always how it's evolved. It started with an AMD 133, and I thought it was great, and then my grandfather wanted to upgrade to a Penny 120, and I was freaking out until, of course, I realized that I was able to now, at the time, enjoy full screen video. So, and the only problem I had at the time was back in 1998, I think, I needed an Intel 120, and I had a little bit of trouble getting past a boss fight in Final Fantasy VII on the elevator. I can remember. Well, my first system was an AMD that I built. It was an AMD K6350, and eventually I wanted to go into playing with video and stuff, so I upgraded to an Intel slot processor at 600 megahertz. And eventually, before I was dragged from New Hampshire to Florida for financial reasons, I upgraded to a Pentium 3 800 copper line, which I could almost get to 1 gigahertz on FSB, and I would not touch voltage overclocking until actually maybe about 1 or 2 years ago. And from there I went to a Pentium 4 Northwood, awesome line, 533 bus, 2.26 with an iWill motherboard. That's the first motherboard I can remember specifically by brand name. Then my AMD socket 754, the claw hammer based core, 1 meg cache per core, and I upgraded from that to a socket 939, a 3500. About a year ago, got a X2 4400 for, again, the socket 939, and recently I got an Opteron 185, and that runs at 2.6. And not just the video experience, I also, for a while, was running, before I got a little bit better at Perl and understanding how to, I'd say I'm still maybe a 1 out of 10 on Perl, if that. But understanding the regex and how the script was built, I've now since gotten better at that. But by the time I customized it so that it gave more of a load on the processor, and I clearly, distinctively remember the socket 754 single channel claw hammer running at 2.0 gigahertz with 1 meg cache, chewing through 100 megabyte plus sized access logs in 15 seconds flat, where the AMD socket 939 with 200 megahertz advantage, but with half the cache, would take a full minute. So, right off the bat there, from that alone, on more processor intensive aspects, where you're doing a lot of number crunching, it's good to have as much cache as you can get a hold of. So, and then there's also processor instructions. Intel's adding SSE4, which is, I believe, offhand, aimed at audio and video encoding. So, using the exact same Intel processor with the exact same frequency, hertz or whatever, and other same instructions, you should get a noticeable performance increase on any software that automatically supports those instructions. Quad-core versus dual-core, again, that's depending if the software supports the multiple processor cores. I haven't read specifically about Crysis, but I'm sure it supports quad core. I mean, they've been building it since when I don't know how long they've been building it, but I know that I've read that they knew about quad cores and they were optimizing it to use at least 4 cores on there, and some programs will take advantage of 2 cores, but not 4. Maximum PC. Favorite magazine of mine, one of them. I like reading Wired magazine. I also like reading Discoverer, though there are some issues for having a scientific magazine with the politically correct BS, which I don't appreciate, because science is science regardless of other topics. And right, so anyway, but we're not here to talk about science or those aspects of science. This is the November 2007 issue. I already have the December issue. Unfortunately, this magazine, I usually blast through it real quickly when I bring it to work. I read it at work. Anyway, feature of CPU. This is Tom Halfhill. I'm not sure. He usually has a column in the front of the magazine. And Thomas McDonald, sometimes he annoys me. I mean, I like reading his column too, but I mean, he was like, oh, the end of PC gaming, and come on, give us something more solid to read, more factual, not theory. I don't like theory that much as I like, educated guesses. Tom was talking about the Sun UltraSpark T2 processor, codenamed Niagara 2. This thing has 8 cores and can handle 64 threads simultaneously. Now, I don't know how many threads an AMD 64 or the new quad core coming out from AMD can handle, and the Intel processors. But that sounds like a pretty badass processor from Sun, and that thing only runs at 1.4 gigahertz. So I want to emphasize that the hertz, the megahertz, gigahertz, it doesn't necessarily have much impact. In fact, I don't really see much point in overclocking my CPU, and that's why I don't really bother to overclock with voltages, because one, you're going to shorten the lifespan, and I don't have a ton of money, though I am kind of pissed that I can now buy 4 gigs of RAM for under $200 and get an unlocked multiplier on a processor after I got set and happy with my Socket 939 system, and now AMD is releasing all these unlocked multipliers on FX processors, and you can't find an FX60, but oh well, that's how technology goes. So anyway, but yeah, gigahertz it's not all about gigahertz. Cache has a big role in it, processor instructions, so for example, I run VMware Server to emulate Linux because I want to support Linux browsers when I do web design, but I also don't want to turn my hard drive into Swiss cheese and start making partitions just for virtual memory, which, by the way, I have enough memory, and I don't load junk into my memory that I'm not using. And so I don't need to extend a portion of my hard drive to load junk that I'm not using to begin with. A huge complaint about OS X, a Unix-based OS, and Linux. So anyway, and virtual machines take advantage of SSE instructions, which are present on both Intel and AMD systems. You want to find out what instructions your CPU supports? Get a current copy of CPU-Z and read about those instruction sets on Wikipedia. That's all. I'm not a huge technology nut. I can't tell you every little thing in the world, but I can give you what I know to that extent, and trust me, it's not about gigahertz alone. So otherwise we'd still be using the NetBurst architecture, wouldn't we? Thanks for watching, and I'll try to get some Oblivion footage up. Unfortunately, every time I shoot it, it goes over well over 10 minutes. Thanks for watching, and